what I was hoping to do, so my name's Amanda Millmore, and I'm here with my lovely colleague, Dr. Jo Cordy, who's an academic developer in our Centre for Quality Support and Development. Meanwhile, I'm an associate professor in law and a school director of academic tutoring, which we will reveal to you what that's all about during the course of our project. And we're delighted to be invited here to talk to you about it, as it's been quite a busy few years in Reading, and this project has been a magnum opus, if you like. It's been a very large project. It's been an institutional project, and we are going to explain it to you and very much share with you how things have gone with that. We are hoping to use Mentimeter, and there are, if people would like to get involved, I appreciate we have a niche audience, but hopefully an interested audience. And we have one or two parts where we'd quite like your input in what your thoughts are on this, just to sort of see where people are coming from different institutions. But essentially, the aim of this session was to explain the process by which we have changed the way we tutor our students, the way we run what was personal tutoring for us and has transformed into academic tutoring. In particular, and Jo will talk to you about the resources we've created to support both academics and students, because that's actually been a really fundamental part of this, not just to sort of rebrand our system, but to actually make fundamental changes, and also to share some of our good practice more generally. And you can see the impact, because we now, I think when we put in the abstract for this, we were 1 year on from implementation, and we're now 3 years on from implementation. And so we've got a lot more to share, and hopefully we can share what's working well. So the session is effectively in 4 different chunks, and we will give you a little bit of background about the origins of our academic tutor system. And it's very much been a collaborative process from, I think there are 3 stages. We look at design of the new system and issues that we had, implementation of it, because that's been a major issue, and then of course support. And Jo will talk about the support and the evaluation of the impact of the changes we've made. And then I'm going to talk very briefly at the end about COVID and the impact that's had on academic tutoring in Reading, at least. But I don't know how many of you are familiar with Mentimeter, whether people are interested in doing this. I use this a lot in my teaching. But if you would like to contribute, you can go to www.menti.com and use the code on the screen, which is 8523 3359. And whether you are a pastoral or personal or academic tutor in your own institution or not, I'd be really interested to know what the barriers are to effective tutoring. So rather than tutoring primarily in your subject, but the support that you give students outside that. And I know it differs from institution to institution. So I will give you a moment to have a go at that. And equally with a small group, we always could take oral contributions as well if people wanted to. Some familiar words coming up here. Thank you. I'll just give a moment. We will be coming back to Mentimeter on and off throughout the presentation. There's some really interesting words there which resonate with us. The origins of the project were that there was a lot of concern from staff about how our personal tutoring process worked. Every student in Reading was allocated a personal tutor from within their department or school. And there was also a lot of concern from students that it wasn't quite working for them. And our starting point was very much looking at what the barriers were to tutoring and how they impacted on us. And the kind of comments coming up here about workload, about the clarity of the role, what the remit of your role is, appropriate expertise, and of course the big one of time is a huge factor. They all came up very much with us. So I will share you, we had focus groups that were run with staff and students, and these were the issues when we reviewed our system that we found were problematic, and they very much match your experiences. There was an issue about demarcating the roles and responsibilities. What does a tutor do? How far should a tutor support a student? There's issues with students engaging with that. The workload has been a huge problem, and the recognition for the work that you do or don't do. And one problem from a student point of view is actually the consistency of the experience, that one student may have a fantastic tutor and someone else has a very sort of weaker tutor, if I can put it that way. So that was the sort of the origins of the project. And we had focus groups with students, with staff, and these were the kind of words that came through with what they felt a personal tutor should be. And the word that kept coming out for us was academic. And not that they're a substitute mum or substitute dad for the students, but you can see the kinds of issues that where people are talking about their problems and the circumstances and difficulties, but also the very academic side, the choices of study, the choices of modules, the advice they need, their options and signposting. And as a result, we decided that we needed to do something to improve our system, to have a better experience for students, but also to make it clearer for staff what the role was, and to clarify their involvement. So these were some of the key things, and I'd be interested if you'd be interested in rating whether these are an issue within your own institution. So to see actually how effective these are for us, because these were, I think, the main issues that we experienced in Reading. The lack of clear boundaries for tutors. They didn't know whether they were meant to be sitting for 2 hours with a student in tears, or whether they should then hand them on to someone else. What do they do? The stress of workload was a big issue, and then the lack of support and recognition for tutors, because tutoring is often seen as the sort of poor relation from the work that we do. And of course, you do also have those issues of lack of student engagement, students who don't want to meet with a tutor, students and others who do. I mean, some monopolise your time in some ways and some don't. And in particular, we had an issue where staff didn't really know what the support services were within Reading. And we have a wide range of support services, but if you don't know they exist, it's very hard to signpost them to your students. So thank you. That's really interesting. It looks like you have better knowledge of support services in your institution than perhaps our staff did. And I have to say, I've been a tutor prior to this project, and very much did not understand just the breadth of support, from support with our disability services and counselling, to also having support with study advice or academic English, for example. So thank you very much for your contributions. This was our approach. So we'd identified that there were these issues. There were issues for staff, and there were issues of consistency for students. And we took a very collaborative approach to this. And we've given you our timeline of how it started. So it started back in 2017, in fact, back end of 2016, with a working group looking and following on from student staff surveys that there were issues with our personal tutor system. And you can see we had a collaborative design process where we went out and talked to the different stakeholders within the university, and ultimately came forward with a consultation. It moved on to the implementation of this, where we had some money behind it, which was quite critical, actually. And then the final launch was the autumn of 2018. And actually, I have to throw my hands up here. My involvement started at the green implementation stage. Jo was involved far more in the earlier stages, but we've been implementing our academic tutor system, and we're now business as usual. So we can take you through the process. So our collaborative design, what we wanted to share with you is one of the key messages from our project. This was an institution-wide project. And one of the things that we discovered from this was having proper project management has made a real difference to the success of the project. So we had a project officer, and the university, understanding there was an issue, actually put their money where their mouth is on it. And we had a teaching and learning dean, so a senior management lead, and we had a project officer. But beyond that, we then ran work streams, and we had 4 separate work streams with looking at institutional change, looking at the student engagement, where we had student involvement. RUSU is our student union, and we had RUSU representatives on the steering group. We had academic representatives on the steering group, which is where I came in, because in 2018 I was the chair of our community of practice for the people in charge, what we used to be called as senior tutors in our schools, responsible for the tutoring process within our own schools. We have a community of practice, and we've then come forward to become directors of academic tutoring. But you can see from this that we had a range of people, from sort of project and strategy people to student engagement, student services, staff and students. So a really wide consultation. And more than that, it was working together. So we did all work in our own work streams, but we all worked as a team together, which was quite critical here. And of course, we did adopt principles of partnership throughout. This wasn't a, here's a proposal, hey students, what do you think? We actually got the students in on the ground, and staff in on the ground as well, which was quite critical. Having designed a new system, we then had to implement it. So I will share with you, we have some lovely graphics which show that what we were trying to do, we wanted to move from the sort of personal and primarily pastoral emphasis of our personal tutor system. So every student had a personal tutor within their school, and they were led by senior tutors. And we moved to a new system where they're called academic tutors. So we're trying to play to the strengths of our academics. And you have directors of academic tutoring within each school. And that's actually been another key change for our process. And you can see we've put student success at the heart of this. And it's about supporting the academic, the personal, and the professional development of our students. And that doesn't mean we disregard the pastoral aspect of it. Some people felt that initially that was actually what we were doing. We're just parking that, giving that to someone else. So we do still treat our students as individuals with their own personal problems, but we are not there to solve every personal problem, and that's really key. And you can see this partnership works across from students, academics and professional services staff. And in particular, we emphasise to students that it's a partnership with your academic tutor. This is not a them and us situation. We work with you through your studies, and ultimately we're the people who write your reference at the end of the day. So we were trying to reframe the role for staff. We also were trying to emphasise that for students, we were just one part of the jigsaw, and to give a more consistent experience across the university. So as you can see, you have we're part of the academic support, but you have the wider support, hall wardens, we have our chaplaincy, we have peer mentoring, we have our careers and employability, and then we have our health and wellbeing teams where we have welfare and counselling and disability and so on. So we're just part of the puzzle, but we were trying to, again, one of the issues is demarcating how far your tutoring role should go, and it was good to be able to see where we sit in that, and that was quite critical. So the key features of our new system, our academic tutor system, our ATS, is the focus on those 3 aspects of the relationship between the tutor and the tutee. The academic, where we can help advise about module choices, about career paths with professional development, about supporting them if they need to use exceptional circumstances processes with deadlines and things like that. But keeping that holistic view of the student as an individual who you can support. We introduced directors of academic tutoring. So I was a senior tutor in my old hat, and I didn't have any parity with directors of teaching and learning. We were kind of the poor mouse relations. And one of the big changes has been giving us more strategic leadership within our schools and departments. And that's been really important. And as you'll see, it's certainly come into form with COVID and our response to that. The real fundamental money where your mouth is change was the welfare team. So one of the problems was tutors were spending a lot of time dealing with non-mental health, personal life issues for our students. So dealing with family breakdowns, with housing crises, with bullying or harassment, or any of those things that affect a student's studies, but which weren't a mental health problem or a physical health problem or a language problem. And we invested in a welfare team, and Jo will tell you a bit about our welfare team, but we actually have welfare officers who the students can consult, they can drop in to see, or we can refer them to, and they reach out proactively to students. And that has been life-changing, I will be honest, from an academic point of view. And of course, making sure that we don't just introduce a system and then let everyone get on with it. We actually have ongoing support, and support for staff and also support for students. And Jo will talk to you about the sort of the mirrored support that we offer for this. We try to emphasize the role of the academic tutor and make it very clear to people, because I think people weren't clear about the remit, that your real role is supporting the academic support and study skills. We help with assessment and feedback. We can give generic feedback support. We help with engaging with wider activities, whether it's volunteering, whether it's subject related, but also careers. And where necessary, we act a bit like GPs, I think, that we refer to specialist services. So knowing the limits of our own skills. I am not a mental health specialist. I am not an international support tutor. I don't know enough about visas and finance, but I know a person who does. And that's what's really important, is not expecting me to know all that, but to know where to signpost my students to. And just before I hand over to Jo, this is my role. So I have for the last nearly 4 years been a school director of academic tutoring. And when we implemented the system, I was the chair of our community of practice across the university. So again, trying to get that consistency of experience. But we are responsible for strategic leadership within our schools. So it's still devolved to schools being able to run things how they want, but with a sort of a minimum standard of expectation for students. And it has meant we've been able to develop certain things which suit our students, which might work for me in law, but might not work in biological sciences, for example. And I support my tutors, I induct them into the process, I give them support ongoing, and I support particularly some of the more vulnerable students or for example, at the moment, I have students on staff on sick leave, and so I step in to cover when they're on sick leave. So I kind of have an umbrella pastoral role in the school, but I also have a strategic one. So there are things that I've done strategically to try and improve that tutor-tutee relationship. And I'm going to hand over to Jo to explain about the support that we offer to our students. So there you go, Jo.
Thanks, Amanda. I think I'm going to need to ask you to change slides for me, aren't I? Because it's your screen. So yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about the support that we've put in place for both staff as academic tutors and for students to help them make the most of the tutor-tutee relationship. And a lot of this is support that we put in place during the funded part of the project, but it's also ongoing support that's sort of continually being refreshed and updated and added to. So one of the main things that we provided right at the start of the implementation system was a guide for tutors. So initially this was a printed handbook that we provided for all academic tutors. It's since moved online because there were various printing problems during COVID. I think we might return to maybe some printed copies at some point, but it's something that's updated each year with any new responsibilities and contact details and things like that. And I think tutors find that really useful to just sort of have a copy on their desktop, or actually on their desk if it's physical copy. And along with that, we also produced a signposting document, which is a tear out page of the guide or a downloadable PDF. And that just, it gives tutors all the details they need of all the support services at the university, kind of divided up into what your tutee might need support with. So if they need support with immigration or visas, where do they go? If they need support with English language, where do you send them? And that's something that tutors can just have up by their desks. We also produced an online a website, the Academic Tutor Toolkit, which kind of brings into one place details of all the support services, details of the role, links to other places on the university website that are useful for tutors, information about what you could be doing in your tutor meetings and things like that. And we also ran some actual physical face-to-face workshops pre-COVID, obviously, to try and help tutors get to grips with the difference between the personal tutor role and the new academic role, which were not huge, but were a bit nuanced in some ways. As Amanda said, there were people who kind of misinterpreted the messages to start with, so we ran workshops to try and make sure that those messages were getting through. Okay, can I have the next slide, Amanda? Thank you. We also, on the tutor toolkit on the website, we also produced some suggested outlines for tutor meetings, so that tutors could see what could I be talking about to my part 1 duties in the spring term, what could I be talking to my finalists about, and things like that. And then more recently, there's been a slightly separate working group within the university looking at student transitions, so both into university but also into different years, and that has tied in really nicely with the academic tutor system, so supporting tutors to support their tutees as they come into the university or as they move between the different stages. So we've produced some more resources around that, including things like guidelines for tutors to run their welcome week meetings, how to kind of help the students settle in and get to know each other and that sort of thing. Okay, thanks, Amanda. And as Amanda said, we really tried to make sure that the resources and the messages that we were sending out to staff were mirrored in what we were producing for students as well. So we also put together a toolkit for students, which is part of the wider student support pages for Reading, and also a signposting document for students as well, so that if they don't want to go to their tutor to be signposted somewhere else, they can find out where to go and kind of self signpost, if that's an expression. And we produced various things, sort of trying to remind students that their tutors were there for them. So we produced some physical postcards to put around the departments. Emails were sent out at regular times of year to remind students to actually go and see their tutor and what their tutor could help them with, and things like that. Thanks, Amanda. And then again, mirroring the resources available for staff, we produced some guidance for students on what they could expect to talk about in their different tutor meetings in the different stages of their programme, so that students could go into the meetings having already maybe thought a little bit about what they could talk to their tutor about at those different stages. And one of the really nice things that we did just prior to COVID was produce a couple of videos where we got students and staff from the university to talk a bit about their experiences, and also do some sort of role plays, so that other students and staff as well could watch the videos and actually get an idea of what that tutor-tutee relationship could be like and the sorts of things you could talk about. So we had one which was just a kind of introduction to the system, and then one which focused a bit more on how your tutor could help you deal with feedback and understand how to use your feedback effectively. We did have plans for more videos, but they unfortunately got shelved due to COVID, and then that never really got resurrected. But it's still a possibility somewhere down the line. Thanks, Amanda. Yeah, so we've got another mentee here, if anyone is able to contribute to this. So we just wondered if anyone had any other examples or ideas of ways in which either tutors or tutees are supported at your institution, or other things that you think might be useful, to see if there are any other things that are being done out there that we can basically steal. I'll give it a minute and oh, here we go. Never want to jump in too soon.
That's actually a really nice comment there, because one of the things on our toolkit, we actually did a showcase about different tutoring, and I actually did a session about group tutoring with one of my students, and where we talked about doing tutoring groups across the years, so rather than segregating them by year. And that actually has been one of the things we've suggested going forwards, is offering group tutor meetings where you might have done individual ones, as long as the individual one is always remains an option for students to have that grouping. I'll let Jo come back on the others.
Yeah, it's up to the individual tutors really whether they want to offer group tutorials or individual. And I think it's still quite a mixture, isn't it, Amanda, as far as I can work out. But yeah, group tutorials do definitely have advantages in that way.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
And we do have sort of peer mentoring in addition to our tutor system. So I noticed the buddy system idea. We have what are called star mentors in Reading, who are second or third year students who every new student is allocated, if they wish, a star mentor, which is mainly the first term, but there is some ongoing relationship, but that's really, really good. It's a really nice idea, having that balance of staff and students and students and students.
Yeah, awards for tutors is a nice idea as well. I think we have that, don't we?
We have the student union have
yeah, the union
annual sort of excellence awards, and there is an award for like the best tutor by number of nominations usually, but it is just the one.
Yeah, that might be something that could be expanded maybe per school. Or...
Yes, possibly getting students to nominate. As long as we don't have the naughty list of tutors as well, which is yes. Always a problem. And yes, our school director of academic tutoring, I send out, I'm the conduit for messages from the Central University, from often Jo, in fact, to send messages out about particular things. And we've actually this year instituted a monthly email from the director of academic tutoring to the students, giving them information. But I also send regular messages to staff saying, don't forget to tell your students about X and Y. Proactive rather than reactive. Yes, that's very much our approach. That's fantastic. Shall I move on, Jo?
Yeah, thank you. We can share these along with the slides afterwards, so you can see what other people have added.
But thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Lovely. Okay, so I'm going to move on to talk just a little bit about the evaluation that we did towards the end of the funded project. So this was work that was mostly done in the sort of spring to summer of 2020. So as you can imagine, it got a little bit sidetracked by COVID because we were sort of starting in around March. But we got data from various surveys. You can see on this slide the sort of things that we were looking at to try and evaluate some of the impact that this project and the change in tutoring had. One of the things that we were a bit disappointed by was that we had a whole lot of student focus groups arranged for late March and April 2020, and obviously those had to be shelved, and because of other people's different priorities, changing priorities when COVID came along, we didn't have the resources to kind of move those online or do them in any other way. So unfortunately we lost quite a bit of possibly useful information there, although Amanda did manage to carry out some with her law students, which was very interesting. So I'll just run you through a little bit of the data that we got. So this is from the UK engagement survey, and we were able to put some institution-specific questions in for the last few years. So you can see there's 4 questions we added in, all to do with academic tutoring specifically, and it's really encouraging to see that there's quite a big change between the summer 2018 survey, or spring, whatever time of year it is, before we introduced the new academic tutor system, and then looking at the 2020 survey. So there's quite a big increase in the percentage of students agreeing with all of these statements, particularly the one around signposting. So I think the effort we put into trying to make sure that tutors understood the support services and knew where to send their duties was really paying off there. Thanks, Amanda. We also looked at NSS data, and obviously these questions around academic support aren't specifically about academic tutoring, but it's all part of it, isn't it? Being able to contact staff and getting useful advice and things. So we could also see that there'd been a bit of an improvement here in the responses we were getting. And again, as I said, it's not just to do with academic tutoring, but hopefully that's played a bit of a part in this improvement. As I said, we couldn't do the student focus groups, unfortunately, but our student union, RUSU, did a few kind of spot surveys, spot focus groups. I'm not quite sure what the word is, but basically grabbing students around campus to ask them questions on a variety of topics. And one of the topics that they did was academic tutoring. So I think in this particular set of questions, I can't add up the numbers quickly, but it's about 35 students, I think, they collared to ask questions about academic tutoring. And you can see from here that the responses are largely positive, although there are quite a few people who, in this particular example, my academic tutor has helped me to resolve issues relating to my studies. So presumably quite a few students felt they hadn't really had issues relating to their studies, and marked non-applicable. But of the students who thought they had issues, it was largely very positive. They thought that their academic tutor had helped them resolve those. We can see the same sort of picture to do with signposting to other services as well. So a vast proportion of students agree or strongly agree that their tutor has directed them to other appropriate support services. And also one of the other questions was about support for academic, personal and professional development as well. So again, can see quite a lot of agreement there. So we were able to get a bit of feedback from students in that way, and also some nice comments from students as well. So a lot of students obviously feel that their academic tutor is basically doing the role that they should be doing. So this was feedback given to RUSU, but through year reps and course reps. So it's nice and positive. We also surveyed academic tutors, both in the middle of the project and at the end in 2020. And these are some of the questions. This is a bit of a busy slide, I apologise. But these are some of the questions that we asked them, or some of the statements we asked them to rate. And we can see here that there's quite a positive change from the middle of the project to the end of the project. We don't have the baseline data. We didn't survey the personal tutors before they changed role, but we can see that just from the middle of the project to the end, there's been quite an improvement in, for example, their familiarity with the resources that are available to them, and the proportion of their tutees that they're meeting. There's obviously still some way to go with some of these, particularly the sort of value that tutors think is put on their role by the university. So there's quite a big increase between the middle of the project and the end, but still only about a third of tutors feel that their role is valued by the university. So that's obviously something that we still need to work on. And again, here you can see a few comments from tutors. I'll just give you a sec to read those. The one at the bottom, I think, demonstrates another challenge that is kind of ongoing, in that it is still a bit inconsistent. It depends on the student, it depends on the tutor. So as this tutor says, it's very useful for those students who engage with it, but not all of them do. And I think you could probably say the same for tutors, couldn't you, Amanda? Thank you. Amanda mentioned our new student welfare team, which came into place in the beginning of the 2018-19 academic year. And we have 6 student welfare officers and a team manager, and they all have a few departments that they're responsible for. And so we just pulled out a little bit of data about how much that service has been used since it was put into place. And you can see that even in the first year that it was running, about 900 students had engagement with the welfare team, and that was what the welfare team themselves called meaningful engagement. So not just that they'd been in contact with them once, but they'd actually had some kind of ongoing support from them. And then an increase in the students that they saw in the next academic year as well. So, I mean, looking at this, it really makes us think, what on earth were those students doing before that welfare team was there? They were probably spending a lot of time talking to their academic tutor or not getting any support. So hopefully this really shows that team has made a huge difference to both students and academic tutors and directors of tutoring. And again, we've only got data from a small number of students on the welfare team, but those students overwhelmingly would recommend the service to other students who needed it, and thought that their experience with it, excuse me, was very positive. Okay, thanks, Amanda. Okay, so before I hand back to Amanda, I'm just going to go over a few of the lessons that we've learned from the project as a whole, really, not so much just from the evaluation. But the 3 main things to pick out here, I think, that we've really learned is with a project like this. I mean, it sounds obvious, but communication really is key at all stages. So right from the consultation through implementing the project, through to the evaluation. So just making sure that all stakeholders are kept informed, are kept consulted at all stages, and that, as we saw with the resources are kind of adapted and updated according to the information that's come out of the evaluation. So, for example, in the tutor survey, we found that there were still a few misconceptions and things about what the system meant and about what they were expected to do. And then as a result of that, we've adapted the resources, we've put into place more training and more guidance about the role itself. So that was the first thing. The second was the importance of kind of coming at this from both directions, as it were. So support from senior management, and as Amanda said, the actual provision of the funding for the welfare team. Obviously that was very important, but also getting the buy-in from the tutors and from the students as well. The system, it wouldn't have worked if it was all imposed from the top, and it wouldn't have worked if it was just coming up from the tutors and the students. It really needed both of those things for it to be effective. And the third thing is the importance of playing to your strengths and making sure that everyone can do that. So saying to academic tutors, you focus on what you do well, you focus on supporting students' academic, personal and professional development, and let the support services do the things that they're professionally trained to do as well, so that everybody is doing the things that they do well, that they're trained to do. Thanks, Amanda. And finally, just a couple of things about transitioning this project to business as usual, because obviously it was a 2-year fixed term funded project. And since then, the system's been ongoing and will be ongoing, hopefully. So we needed to put a few things in place just to make sure that it could keep going and keep being successful. So we have a university level committee, the Committee on Student Experience and Development, which is kind of responsible for oversight of the system. And they receive an annual report on how everything's going, but also updates regularly from the school directors of academic tutoring on issues that are occurring. The school directors of academic tutoring themselves are responsible for as Amanda said, the system in their own schools. And they have the community of practice, which is a really supportive network for them, where they can kind of bounce ideas off each other, they can ask questions, they can say, I've had this student that's put in an extenuating circumstances request, I'm not quite sure what to do with it, what would you do? So it's really a really supportive community. And then the resources and the training and the guidance and things is kept centrally and updated by various different departments around the university. So where I work, we're responsible for the staff guidance and training. Student services are responsible for the student facing resources. Yes, I think that's all I was going to say on that. So I'm going to hand back over to Amanda, who's just going to say a little bit about what COVID's done.
Well, as you can imagine, this has really magnified the importance in some ways of our academic tutoring system, and also highlighted some of the cracks in the system, I suppose, as we have for everything. Obviously, everything has changed in the last 18 months. I was going to ask very briefly whether there was any particular impact, positive or negative, that you found in your institution on tutoring from COVID, because obviously we're trying to have lessons learned, to have those, what positives can we take from it all, whether it's in our teaching, whether it's in our support. But I would be interested in any impact that you've had, and I'll tell you very briefly just the key points from our point of view. Just give everybody a moment on that. Yeah, I think we agree with that one, actually. The use of technology has improved in many ways the communication. Demand increased, yep.
Yeah, we certainly had conversations, didn't we, about whether tutors should be asked to do more to support their students, or whether they were already being asked to do enough. And yeah, quite a difficult balance to strike.
I think, you know, COVID has shown us also being a great leveler in many ways, that staff have obviously, many people have children or elderly relatives and are trying to juggle the caring responsibilities. They've realised just how hard it can be for some students as well. We've had students who've gone home and have ended up caring for family members. I had students who were homeschooling siblings, for example. And yes, I think the demand for our welfare services and our wellbeing services did skyrocket. Equally, I think we also found that the shift to Zoom calls, we use Microsoft Teams widely, has made it much easier for students to contact the welfare team, to contact us. They might get lost on the route from my office to talking to our welfare team in their building, but they would be much happier picking up a phone almost now than they might have been. And I completely agree with the academic advising comment there about ad hoc meetings. The thing that's worked amazingly for me has been the use of Microsoft Bookings, which is one of Microsoft's suite of systems where it appears to be set up, designed for sort of hairdressers or plumbers who are small businesses to book appointments. But I have a page and a link, and my students go to it and they can see when I'm available, and I have set times that I'm available for students, and they just book that appointment. They don't have to have that email back and forth of, are you free on Tuesday? No, I'm not. Are you free Wednesday? We work through that. Let me just have a look. The pictures are hiding this. Yes, the idea of so the workload issue has been a major issue for us as well, because many staff have been juggling homeschooling alongside their normal roles, and the expectations. There is something about you know, are you instantly available all the time? And when we were all online all the time in meetings, some students found it that they expected a sort of instantaneous response. One of the things we do have in Reading is we have a 48-hour or 2 working day response time for emails, which is not always observed, I will be honest, but it's useful to have an expectation for everybody. I've certainly pushed colleagues to make sure they have a decent out of office message if they're part-time or they're on leave, just to set that expectation, because students can't expect an issue to be resolved overnight. If you message me on a Friday night, I'm not necessarily going to be able to deal with it until Monday morning. And that workload issue, thank you, these are really, really rich comments. I have colleagues who say this is not in my job description, this is not part of my job. And that can be quite difficult when you're dealing with vulnerable students. But I think we've all found that some of the online phone calls and meetings have been so much better. And I have students who are carers, who commute, who do all these things, and it has made a big difference. Thank you so much. I think the 3 areas that we've found have had a huge impact. Our welfare team have been phenomenal. They moved online, our counselling team likewise. But the key message, I think, from our whole project is that it's a proactive approach rather than reactive. And we used to be very reactive. Student comes with a problem, we try and solve it. Whereas now we're trying to build those partnerships with students earlier and more firmly on firmer foundations, so that they know who we are before a problem arises, and also we can head off problems. And I think the role of our tutors has been magnified during the pandemic. In particular, the university was asking tutors to reach out more to their tutees. And it's been that, because we lost that personal bumping into people in corridors, but making sure you reach out to them and say, are you okay? How are things going? Which has caused workload issues. It's that whatever you do, the more you reach out, the more workload it is for staff, but it has been incredibly rewarding. For the directors of academic tutoring, despite being called directors when we'd gone from being senior tutors, we were not being treated prior to the pandemic as an equivalent to our directors of teaching and learning, our directors of research. And this was a bit of an issue because historically that was always the problem, and we weren't getting the reward and recognition for it. But the pandemic has actually raised our profile, I think, because our responsibility has a pastoral element, and because we were coordinating support within our schools. Suddenly, we were on more people's radar, and we started being invited to really critical meetings. So myself and another of our school directors in a different school, we were invited into our university high-level major recovery teams, one of the working groups. And so when we were trying to deal with the flood, the tsunami even, of students requesting extensions on work because of COVID and the impact, and we were trying to find a solution to that and looking at what do we do about exams, we were sitting at the table with a very student focus. We are the student focused members of staff. And I think that was really vital. It took about 6 weeks before somebody realised that we needed to be at the table. But once we were, I think we've kept our feet and our knees under the table. And that's continued as obviously the pandemic continues. But as we've tried to move back to normal, we have been invited to more working groups. We've cemented our roles on certain committees. And I think that's actually been really important, because suddenly people have realised there's more to teaching than just what goes on in the classroom. It's about that wider support as well. And that's been so important. And our community of practice has been phenomenal. It's genuinely one of the nicest group of people I work with. We have lovely Jo who supports us and coordinates us in our meetings. But we do use each other as sounding boards. There's that, that other people get what you're going through, and that's really important. So I do think there have been positives, and definitely the use of online meetings has been quite transformational, I think. Ongoing challenges. We do have issues of engagement with both staff and students continue. We are individuals. We are not all a homogenous being. I have some fantastic tutors. I have some who don't quite see the point at times, which is frustrating. And students, again, it's getting them to see the value and the benefit of having a good relationship with their tutor. The numbers of tutees, certainly my own school has increased capacity. We have more students than ever before, and that has increased the number of tutees I have and have to look after. And that does impact on the time you've got to give them, though I do find group meetings work really well as a way of keeping in touch with more students. The recognition for our school directors of academic tutoring is getting there. I think we're on a journey. We keep fighting, we keep saying how important we are and reminding people why we bring value to meetings and high level discussions. And one of the things we've really hit up is our capacity of our welfare team. As all support services, they're generally underfunded and overused. They need to be used by our students, and our welfare team, because they are so proactive as well, I call them up and they will reach out to a student. I could do with twice as many of them. But they are phenomenal in what they do, and they have been transformational in what I'm doing. And then obviously the ongoing quality assurance and the enhancement of the process. So it's not we're not at a, hey, we've solved it. We're not in that situation, but we certainly think we've got a better system now than we had 3 or 4 years ago. But that quality assurance, having those baseline requirements. So the baseline is you can expect to meet with your tutor once a term, and that's the minimum. And every tutor should do that. Tutors will write your reference, and people now know what the tutor will be doing and can help them with.